Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Podward State. Matt Paolizzi.
My name's Sam Brungo. Joining us again, we have Grace Cunningham.
Good to be back again.
Yeah, and what a show to come back for, Grace. We were just joined by, and you guys are going to hear this, right? The director of Saturday Night Live, Don King. That's right, the director of SNL we talked to. Just an awesome experience, guys. I don't know about you, but I loved it.
Yeah, that was very cool. Kind of shocked that he responded. I didn't think that was going to happen. Kind of a long shot, but cool that it happened.
Without further ado, let's jump into it.
And today we are joined by, it seems like every week, we say, oh, this is our biggest guest ever. This is our biggest guest ever. But this week, I think it's fair to say that this is our biggest guest ever. The director of SNL and Penn State alumni, Don King. Don, how you doing?
I'm terrific and thrilled to be a part of this podcast. Although I must correct one thing. I may not be the biggest. I'm 5'3". Although I did play football for Joe Paterno. Just a quick story. It wasn't on the Penn State football team. It was a charity game between the disc jockeys of WRSC and the state police. And I was a disc jockey, and Paterno had just taken over the football team, replacing the famed Rip Engel as the coach. And Rip coached the state police, and Joe Paterno coached the disc jockeys. And guess who won? The disc jockeys. And guess who caught a touchdown pass? Don Roy, 5'3" King. And as I came off the field, Paterno said to me, "Hey, nice catch, son." And that was a better feeling than any Emmy win. And I will live with that in my heart forever.
So you had an unconventional college decision journey. Can you take us through your childhood, early goals, and what ultimately led you to Penn State?
I was kind of a lucky all-American boy with great parents who raised me to go to West Point. And I thought that's where I was headed. Didn't even apply to any other schools, and got to my the summer season between my senior year and going to school. And I took a physical for West Point. They found something wrong with my back, and they said, "I'm sorry, you can't come." And they said, maybe when you're 50 or so, you'll have back problems, and we just can't afford to take that risk. And so I scrambled. I thought, man, there goes my career, my childhood dreams. And I made some quick applications and managed to get into Penn State, and had no direction, had no sense of what I wanted to do. I had been a pretty active athlete as a kid, but I figured that Penn State didn't need a 5'3" quarterback. And I had also I had done a lot of acting in junior high school. And I thought, well, maybe I can explore that world. And my first day at Penn State, I walked into the Playhouse Theater, and there was a notice up on the board for casting for the first main stage production. And I said, I'll give that a shot. And I got cast in a play. I only had one line, but I was thrilled to be with all these theater majors and be in this major production with great people and great production facilities. And I thought, I kind of like this. And I regained my acting bug, and I spent more of my time in the theater department than I did anywhere else. But I didn't have the guts to tell my dad, who had raised me to go to West Point, that I wanted to be an acting major. So I got as close as I could and became a broadcasting major. I didn't have a love for television or any kind of passion for that work, but I thought, well, at least it sounds like a real job and I can get by. And but I spent most of my time in the theater department. My senior year, this final project we had in our final broadcasting class was to actually produce a television show. And they divided us into little groups, and I was the producer, I think, of what was to be. You guys go out and make a show, and then bring it back, and we'll tape it, and that will be your project. Well, I was the producer, and we found this little project that some students were doing, and we followed them around and did some B-roll shooting of them, and then brought them back into the studio to do a live panel discussion about this project. It was just to be a round table of these 5 or 6 people, and the student who was assigned to direct it put on his headset and he had his camera self set up and he said, okay, let's get started here. Ready to take 3. No, wait a minute. And I said, whoa. First of all, you got to roll tape. You have to, and if you say ready 2, you got to take 2. You can't say take 3. So he panicked and he choked and he couldn't get the words out. And we were missing the interview. And I said, whoa, let's start this over again. In fact, let me try it. And I put the headsets on and I started to call the shots as quickly as I could, anticipate what might happen next and kind of bark orders, ready to, okay, 2, give a little tighter, ready to, take 2. And watch the clock, make sure that that things were moving smoothly, make sure that I was anticipating what might happen next or who might talk next. Also, if some mistake was made, I just instinctively knew to just not dwell on that mistake, not try to find out what happened or who did it, just to move on to the next thing because those mistakes snowball. And when it was over, I thought, man, that was a pretty high adrenaline rush. And I thought, that feels familiar. And sure enough, I realized that is just like being the quarterback of a football team. It's got that same emotional rush. It's got that same speed, that same intensity and electricity in the air. And I thought, yeah, I could do this. And so I graduated and didn't have the guts to move to New York and be a struggling actor. So I thought, well, maybe I'll work in television, and got a job right there at WPSX at the time. Now it's WPSU. And I found myself a pretty decent television director right off the bat. Every couple of years, moved on to a different station, a bigger station, went to San Jose, went to back to Pittsburgh, worked at KDKA television, went to WCBS here in New York, and then went to a big syndicated show in Philadelphia called The Mike Douglas Show, which was sort of a daytime variety show like Ellen, the Ellen Show is today. And all of those steps were way earlier than most people had gotten the chance to move on. I had overconfidence and took some risks, but things worked out. And from the Mike Douglas Show, moved to back to New York and directed network television for the first time. And it was just sort of one job after another, and it worked out well. And I realized though that I had sort of given up my dreams of being in show business, certainly giving up my dreams of being an actor, but I still had that show business urge inside and loved that sense of telling stories and making people laugh and clap. But ended up directing morning television for 21 years. Now those shows are challenging, and I was pretty good at it and rewarded for it. And I still like that adrenaline rush every morning. But it really wasn't show business. Those shows are designed to tell you whether to take an umbrella to work in the morning, and hey, your sports team won last night, and the world didn't blow up. And here's a little cooking demo, something you might be able to cook tonight, and maybe a fashion show. We did lots of live music too, but it really wasn't show business in front of an audience. And so there was a point in my career where I said, I kind of sold out on my dreams, because as proud as I am of the work I've done and the respect I get, this isn't show business. And out of nowhere, I got a call in 2006 asking me if I would be interested in directing Saturday Night Live. And I said, oh man, there's no show I would rather do than that. But even though I've done every kind of show that Saturday Night Live makes fun of, even though I've done tons of live music, even though I have done hours of news, I can certainly direct comedy news, I've never done sketch comedy. I've never directed actors in little one-act plays. And that's really the bulk of what SNL is. And I can't imagine you want somebody who's never done it before. Turns out they were a little bit panicked. It was close to Labor Day of 2006, and the director had already quit from the past 10 years. And so they said, well, send us your reel. Which reel is like a video resume. And I said, I don't have a reel. I've never collected that stuff and put it together. I've never had to go out and look for a job. And they said, well, don't you have tapes of some things? I said, yeah, sure. I've got some tapes over the years. He said, well, bring them in here to SNL. We'll put together a little reel for you. And they did that. And I got to meet with with Steve Higgins, who was and is the producer of the show, and one of his assistants. And we had a great lunch where we talked about the miraculous magic that this show is and how it comes together in such a short period of time. I sat there hearing those stories, and I just was thrilled because that was and is pure show business. But that lunch ended with my thinking, well, they clearly know that they need someone who can direct sketch comedy. But it was great to get this far, great to hear those inside stories. And I came home, took my daughter, and went to Disney World for a couple of days. Got a call in Fantasyland from Lorne Michaels' assistant saying, "Mr. Michaels wants to talk to you." I said, "Well, I'm in Florida, but I'll be back tomorrow." They said, "Well, come in tomorrow." And so I went into his office after an hour or so wait, and sat down, and this larger than life guy started to talk about how upset he was that the director was leaving, mostly because even though he didn't like the way much of it was directed, even though he thought the writers weren't done a fair service by her work, he said, I don't know if I even want to go through this change. And he asked me if I had directed the Mike Douglas show, and I said yes. That was the only word I think I said in the entire interview, other than "Nice to meet you, Mr. Michaels." And he said, "Okay, fine, thanks." And I left, and thinking once again, man, it was great to get that far and meet that man and get a little sense of what he's like and how he's managed to keep this show alive and viable all this time. But I also thought, well, he clearly needs somebody that knows how to do it. Well, they called the next morning and said, "Hey, we're going to take a chance on you. You come in and do a couple of shows, and we'll see how it works out." I stopped and I said, "Wait a minute. I now have the chance to direct Saturday Night Live, but I'm pretty advanced into my career. I'm pretty advanced in age, and why would I want to take the risk of failure? Why would I want to go in there and feel butterflies in my stomach? Why would I face that amazing cast and those hosts they have every week and not be able to tell them what they have to do as the director, because I won't know what to tell them?" I thought, I don't want to feel those butterflies again. But then, and this might be a valuable long-range lesson for students who are listening, I thought, there's no worse emotion that I know of than regret. And I thought, if I don't try it, if I play it safe, if I don't stick my neck out, I will at some point say, "Oh man, why didn't I try that?" Or maybe I could have done that, or I could have learned on the job, or it would have been. And now I'm watching the new guy direct, and yeah, I could do that. And so I said, "Hey, I can always, if I fail, and there's a good chance I will, I can always come back to this kind of work. I can always do what I know how to do. And it would be, at least I gave it a shot." And so I gave it a shot, and I am so glad I did. It's been the best 15 years of my life, the best professional challenges I've ever had. And it is certainly pure show business. And it is designed to make people laugh and clap. And it's designed to make people there's some healing that we do. And we hold people accountable, and we provide a service that's bigger than show business. And I could not be happier that I took that risk.
So you've been talking about taking risks, when it comes to taking that SNL job, and we're going to dive deep into your SNL career. But first, just a quick little question. As I was doing some research, I came across some rumors of your amateur boxing career. Speaking of, trying different things and new things, could you walk us through sort of your amateur boxing career, however long or brief it was?
Well, there are some parallels to that story too. My dad had been a boxing fan, and my two brothers and I were very active athletes, but mostly in team sports. After my brother finished his college basketball career, he just decided to give it a shot. And he found a trainer, and he did some serious amateur boxing for a couple of years, from I guess the age of 20 to 25, something like that. And he was good at it. And I would sit there and think, man, I wonder what that feels like to step into a ring with half naked and you have to throw punches at somebody you don't know. You have nothing against them, and how will I react? And if somebody's trying to hit me in the face, will I back off and run, or will I grit my teeth and step in? Will I be able to take the pain? And is it a macho sport or is it a technical sport? And so I had this curiosity, and I was not until I was 30, I was directing Good Morning America, and I was finished at noon because the show's on early in the morning. And I thought, you know something, if I don't try it now, I never will. I want to see what that feels like. So I signed up for a boxing class at the West Side Y in Manhattan. And it was run by this old time trainer who was just loved to teach the chess game of the fists, as he called it. He did not care if you could compete, didn't care if you were any good at it. If you wanted to learn this art form, he would teach it to you. And so I said, I want to learn. And he took me under his wing, and we threw jabs for 6 months, just jab after jab, so that I learned that your wrist ends up this way and not this way, or not this way, and how to keep. He was just brilliant at it. As a result, even though I was already over the hill, and even though I already had slower reflexes and didn't have the strength that a 16-year-old would have, I got pretty good at it, only in the sense that I could protect myself. And I thought, I want to see what it feels like to actually compete. And I entered some tournaments and did okay. And I glad I took that risk too.
Your trainer being like an older guy, I feel like you kind of have to have like that older sort of sage figure to be like a boxing coach. Like anytime I think of that, I think of like, Mickey from Rocky, like
yes.
I'd love to take boxing lessons one day. And I know that like my trainer, has to be just, kind of fit that mold,
Those guys are out there. You'll find them.
Obviously, you've worked several different high profile jobs in the film and TV industry, from live television to late night to news coverage. Can you talk a little bit about the difference in approaching of directing those different types of film?
Most of the work, 95% of the work I've done is multiple camera, studio stuff, and live or live to tape. And that in and of itself it's a separate set of skills. And over the breadth of the kind of shows I've done, there's some very common similarities. And some of them I mentioned that I discovered in that first directing class at Penn State. And that is concentration and barking out orders and knowing how to rely on your team and make sure that they are understanding what you want in a very quick period of time, and following the action and anticipating what might happen next and letting mistakes go. All of that is as I said, the television quarterback role. There are other skills that relate to understanding directing, understanding acting, and how to move people around in ways that properly tell jokes and that do justice to the material. Lorne Michaels was a writer, and he therefore puts the writer as by far the most important element in the show. And the writers come before the cast members, and their performances certainly come before any of the production elements, and including directing. And he says that the written word is what counts, and the objective for all of us is to serve the vision of that writer. And that was a little bit unusual for me and hard to grasp, because as a director prior, I had been more like a film director, sort of responsible for all of the elements. And yeah, the writer wrote some questions in the intro, but my job is to bring the whole story to life. At SNL, it's the writer's job really to bring the whole story to life, and I serve those writers. And I have to step back a little bit from what I would expect my role to be, and what I would quite frankly would like my role to be. But it's understandable, not only because it's the writer's vision, but because that writer is responsible for just one of those little one-act plays, and I'm responsible for 10 or 12. And so I don't have the time to understand it and to digest it and to fully bring it to bloom. And it's the writer who therefore talks to the actors about performance and about pace and characterization, and I understand it, and so it's a different set of skills, but I've developed them too. So my job now is to really choreograph and to capture in a way that does justice to the material, so that I can make sure that I'm on the right shot at the right time for the right response, the right laugh, and that's the biggest difference.
Yeah. So you kind of talked about there, how directing actors, you're not really fully directing them like you might, shooting a movie or something. But like,
Right.
what sort of relationship do you have with the actors on set? Like, do you have any conversations with them at any point, just trying to feel out where, they might be so that you're prepared for stuff? Like, what kind of communication do you have with the cast members on set?
When I first started, I thought, because I don't have this experience, I'm going to have problems with these people who are multi-talented. I mean, that cast, all the casts I've worked with are just, they're brilliant people who most come from the improv world, but they all write sketches. Most of them write for themselves. Of course, we have 20 other writers who are helping them out and writing specialty stuff and writing cold opens, writing the political stuff, writing for Weekend Update. But I therefore am very much involved with the physical blocking of them and how they handle props and how they use cue cards and how they move around the room. And as I said, when I first started, I was worried about them saying, "Oh, come on, man, we know how to do this. We don't have to rehearse it again. Just because you do, we don't make us suffer for that." And I thought I had the same trouble with hosts too. But the fact is, I've never had any issues. Even those first years when I would say, "Hey guys, we got to speak. Hold it. I got to figure out this which camera can capture this action." There's no friction, no complaints, no issues, no ego problems at all. And that's partly because Lorne hires people who have that same kind of mentality. But it's also because it's just a cool place to be. And we're working so fast to put on a major 90-minute production in 3-4 days. And they enjoy the work. And even if some of it's stutter step because of the production problems or because of my problems, it never came up as an issue. And that has to do with a host too. I often say that the best part of my job, perhaps the most important part of my job, is hand-holding a host, because especially those who are only doing it for the first time, these people, no matter who they are big in some world. They're iconic athletes or politicians or rappers or movie stars, and they are stepping into a world that they are not familiar with. They, for the first time in their lives, at least first time in a long time, they're feeling butterflies. They are fish out of water. They are in this environment where they're surrounded by the best sketch actors in the world and the best artisans in the world, and they have to catch up. And they are that host is in almost every single sketch, in addition to being out in the field doing some parodies or digital shorts, and that's a hard job. And so they come in saying, "Oh my God, I tell me how to do this, or help me out, or where the cue cards going to be." And so my job is to get them through those rough periods, and I enjoy seeing those idols with occasionally with clay feet, but mostly with just sweaty palms. And so that makes it even more challenging and even more rewarding.
So you said the hosts are usually looking towards you for guidance, but have you ever felt starstruck by a host, or do you have a favorite host that has come on the show?
I'll tell the story I've told often, but as my dad would say, it bears repeating. My first year, the 5th show we did was with Alec Baldwin, who's done it more than anybody, who's just brilliant at it for lots of reasons. He can write, he does impressions, as everybody knows now. He can sing a little bit, and he's just good at it. And that was his 17th hosting. And people afterwards said, "Boy, that was by far your best show, and you should submit that for an Emmy." But there was kind of a cloud over the entire operation, because the next week, the host and musical guest was a guy named Chris Bridges, also known as the rapper Ludacris. And people, I could tell, I didn't understand fully, but I could tell they were thinking, "Oh my God, after this great week with Alec Baldwin, we got this kid coming in. He's 23 years old. He's already been in a national debate with Oprah about the nature of his lyrics. And he's going to come in with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder and maybe an entourage. And he certainly has no acting experience we know of. And this could be a rough week." Well, the way the schedule works, we come in on a Monday and have a short meeting with the host, a very short meeting. We just go around the room and every writer throws out an idea. Usually ideas that never evolve into sketches. I think the meeting is designed to scare the host. And he looked like he was a little scared, but he nodded and seemed to be on board. Tuesday, he does nothing. Wednesday, he comes in and we do a read through where we go through as many as 40 sketches, script in hand, sitting around a big table. And he read fine, but he didn't bring anything to any of the sketches. Nobody expected him to. There were no real characters in anything he did, but he got through that. Thursday, we rehearsed the guest band, and we rehearsed his 2 songs first, and he certainly knows how to do that. And they were relatively tasteful, and we got through them. But then we rehearsed the simple sketches that don't need much in the way of scenery or props, because the selections of those sketches were made just the night before. And there are people on Brooklyn building scenery as we speak. And there are people running around looking for special effects and for costuming and for props. So we do them script in hand, or we do them with just rehearsal blocks. And the first sketch was a talk show, and it was a talk show where Chris's character appeared late in the sketch, and the cue cards weren't ready, so we're doing it just sitting around in folding chairs. And I cue Keenan to start, and Keenan jumps off the wall with some amazingly comical, cartoonish character, and the whole crew's laughing. It was a typical start to it, an SNL rehearsal. And then Cecily Strong picked it up, and she was funnier. And then it was Kate McKinnon, and I thought, "Oh, this is a good sketch to get started this week." And I looked over at Chris Bridges, and he's sitting there with his script, and it's going like this. And I thought, "Oh my God, we're in trouble. I think this kid is on something." Oh man, I thought this could be a really bad week. Well, it circled around to his first line, and that deep baritone voice of his came out with a little quiver in it. And I thought, wait a minute, he's not on something. He's just nervous. And of course he's nervous. Who wouldn't be nervous? You're sitting there with the best sketch actors in the world. They're already bouncing off all these characters. You got to come up with some line reading. You got to come up with some character. And he was nervous. I'd be nervous too. Well, for the next 2 days, he worked harder than any host we've ever had. We always bring the host out last, because in every sketch, we send him back to his dressing room, make sure everything is out there and the cast is gathered for the next sketch. Then we call him out. He was on set as the first actor in every single sketch we did, all day Thursday, all day Friday, and even for the run-throughs on Saturday. And he come out with his script, and he had notes written in the script. And he'd say, "Hey, where are the cue cards going to be for this? Can I look over this way? And can I cross onto the other side of the set right here? And what about an accent? You think if I could do like an Irish guy?" Well, I was so impressed. I mean, the only attitude he showed is, "I want to make this work. I want to do this." However, it's not a very forgiving system to a late starter. So by the time we got to Saturday's dress rehearsal, which is at 8 o'clock with a whole different audience, and we run it as an entire show straight through, just like it's the real thing. He was still struggling a little bit, and he got lost once, and he was looking at the wrong cards one time, and so he suffered a little bit through the dress rehearsal, and I thought, well, maybe I can help. I don't know. I'm the director. I jumped up and I ran out and stopped him as he came out of the studio. And I said, hey, Chris, I got to tell you something, man. I said, I've only done 5 of these, but you have impressed me so much. You've come so far in 3 days, man. I am really impressed. And he got quiet, and he looked up and down the hall to see if anybody was around. And he kind of grabbed me by the lapels, and he kind of pushed me against the wall. He said, thank you so much for telling me that, man. Thank you. Oh, no, he said, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. This is so hard. But, okay, hearing that from the director, that helps. Thank you. Well, he went on and did the live show at 11:30, and it was good. He was smooth and funny, and he did one sketch late in the show with Daryl Hammond. It was about, it's kind of a think piece about 2 old guys sitting on a park bench talking about the young generation, and it was charming and it was sweet, and I was so happy for him and so proud that he had come through. So I got up as the show ended. I went into his dressing room, and now it was filled with all his buddies, all these guys in jackets and toasting him, and he saw me. He kind of pushed his way through his friends. He came over and he said, hey, man, thanks for talking to me between shows. That really helped. I said, shit, you don't have to thank me. You came through. That was great. You proved me right. That was fabulous. And he got quiet again. And he said, hey, go tell my mom that, will you? His mom was standing on the other side of the dressing room, kind of a straight-laced kind of church lady. And I went over, I said, hey, your son did terrific tonight. And she looked down, she said, thank you, but you tell me when he doesn't do well too. So this hardcore gangster rapper just wanted to make his mom proud. And I've had experiences like that with many hosts, and it's probably the most rewarding and heartwarming part of the job.
Hosts come in from all different fields, whether it's sports or they're singers or rappers or actors even. You've had some pretty big names on there, including some presidents like Obama and Trump. What was that like, kind of dealing with, politicians at that big of a stage, and kind of those interactions that you had with them?
They're mostly natural performers, and they're used to dealing with aides who tell them to button their collars and push up their ties and not to say this word to that one. So that they're pretty good at it. I will say that when Trump hosted, he had hosted once before I started directing the show, but when he hosted, when I was there, he was already the candidate. And I thought, oh my God, this would be terrible, simply because there's no way that he's going to be able to be there for the time we need him. We're going to have abbreviated rehearsals. We're just not going to be able to get this stuff done because he can't possibly be there. Well, he was there sitting on set more than any host we ever had. He just said, all right, I'm going to take the week off and just sit here and chat with you guys. I will say he was not very good at it, just did not have any comic timing or any acting talent. Quite frankly, from a personal point of view, people have often said, how did we elect a president who was a reality show host? And I said, well, that does a disservice to reality show hosts, because he was not very good at that either. At least not in my opinion. I thought he was terrible in The Apprentice. At any rate, he was not any better as the host of Saturday Night Live. However, he was willing to do anything. Now, there were a couple of sketches that were a little cloudy, a little shady, and I thought, oh man, he's going to say, I can't do that. I'm running for president of the United States. But he did it. He jumped in and rehearsed it. Those sketches ended up not airing because I believe that there were people on his staff that said, you can't do that, man. But he was willing to. So it was a lot more pleasant week than I expected. I don't think it was as successful as he expected. Now, I'll say that something that surprised me is how good many of the athletes have been. And I thought, well, these guys aren't actors, and they certainly haven't done sketch comedy and haven't done characters or impressions or impersonations. I said, man, we're gonna struggle here. But in general, those athletes are terrific at it. And I've come to the conclusion it's because they are certainly used to performing in front of crowds. They are comfortable in who they are. They say, yeah, sure, I'll put on a dress. Who's gonna question me? And they were just willing to goof. And that's been pleasurable too. Both Manning brothers were great. We've had a few duds too, but I enjoy when the athletes are there too.
So what has your relationship with cast members been like? And is there anyone that you're extremely proud to have worked with?
I mentioned 3 already who have been there the longest in my tenure and who I have the greatest respect for, and that is Kenan Thompson and Kate McKinnon and Cecily Strong. They are strong in so many ways. All 3 of them are really, really good at it. Both Kate and Kenan are, interestingly enough, pretty shy and reserved and quiet. They're both incredibly professional. They always are there on time. They do it without complaint. They are they're just brilliant, good people, besides being good performers. Cecily's a little less, she's a little more vocal about things, but she too is a joy to work with. And yeah, those are my 3. On the other hand, there have just in 15 years, we've been through some great people. I mean, in my first year, many people think that was the best cast ever. And I didn't know any better, but in retrospect, I think that might be true. That was, every one of those people have gone on to do other things. And there's not a, well, wait a minute, whatever happened to Jason Sudeikis, or whatever happened to Will Forte? Every one of them has gone on to do great things. And I feel blessed to have worked with all of them. And of course, Saturday Night Live in general has churned out a whole generation of some of our finest performers and comedians. And every cast member over all 47 years has a picture on a long hallway on the 17th floor where the offices are. And man, you walk down that hallway, oh man, I forgot he was eking on a Saturday Night Live. And of course, there are lots where you say, oh, whatever happened to him? Or I don't remember her. So there's certainly that too. But it's a pretty remarkable repertory company of artists. And that all comes down to what I believe is the real reason. I mean, that's not surprising, but most people know that Lorne Michaels is the heart and soul of that show. And he's the reason that show is still alive and still current and still viable. I heard him say a couple of years ago, he said, if this show ever becomes a nostalgia show, when people say, oh, we used to watch this in college, let's sit down and see what they're up to now. So, oh yeah, well, it's not as good as it used to be, but it was cute. He said, if it ever becomes that, I'm walking away from it. I want it to be every week, as hard hitting as it possibly can be. I want it to hold people accountable. I want it to push the envelope. I want it to be current and important. And he gets his stomach tied up in a knot every week, and he is demanding and he's angry and sarcastic and demands change right up in the middle of the show sometimes. And if it weren't for that, the show would be long gone. He refuses to coast, and I have great respect for that.
Yeah, just like you mentioned, I mean, Lorne Michaels really, the founder, the godfather of SNL, really. Like you said, the heart and soul. over the past like 15 years that you've been working with him, what's your relationship been like with Lorne, and sort of, how do you guys communicate on a daily basis?
We do not communicate on a daily basis. In fact, I will nod to him in the hallway on Wednesday. He'll have a meeting with much of the production people after he's selected which sketches we're actually going to mount. And we may have no communication there at all. There were times years ago when we did. He said, I want this sketch to be in 2 different sets, or make sure this is placed in front of the audience. That the floor of Studio 8H is comprised of many sets that sort of wrap around. And there are a couple of them that the audience can't see at all. The audience is up here and the set is tucked in underneath the bleachers. And so he'll say, I want that one to be on home base. That's where the best sight lines are. And that's the most important one, or that one's physical and it'll get bigger laughs because of an impression that's being done up there, or a special effect that's being done up there. So, but I've kind of learned those lessons and do those things automatically. Now, on Friday, he's watching closely what gets rehearsed, and then he will make suggestions Friday night, but not all of them are particularly vivid until Saturday. He just is brilliant. Once it gets in front of an audience, when it gets in front of that dress audience, he makes notes on the fly, or he gives notes on the fly about everything, about a musical intro, about the wallpaper, about the blocking, or about the shooting. He'll say that's got to be that on that line. It's got to be a single of Kyle, and then I'll get notes between dress and air. Every sketch, there are notes about lighting, or about shot sequence, or about the length of the opening and outs, and he just has a sense of what works and what doesn't in front of a live audience. And then between dress rehearsal and air, he will kill 2 or 3 sketches entirely. Of course, we've gone into the dress rehearsal much as 20 minutes more material than we really need, just so he has the ability to make changes. But he'll kill 3 sketches, and I'll get my script back with 50 Post-its in it. Each Post-it is a change joke, or a whole page crossed out, or new lines written in, and a new ending. And so all the meticulous work I've done on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and through the day on Saturday, gets kicked around and kicked out and reused, jiggled. And I try my best at 11 o'clock in a quick meeting in the control room to tell the camera operators, all right, so in this sketch, kill shot 23 and kill shot 24, and make shot 25 a 2-shot, and then 28 is just a single of Kyle. Wait a minute, Kyle's not even in the sketch anymore. Forget that one, forget 25. And through that whole panic period that I have every single Saturday, I am cursing Lorne under my breath. But inevitably at 1 o'clock, I will say, he was right. That sketch was funnier when it was after Weekend Update, and that sketch was funnier without Kyle in it, and so he's brilliant at that too, and that's part of what makes the challenge of getting the show on the air and off the air bigger and steeper, and the mountain higher to climb. But inevitably, it's worth it, and that's because of his brilliance. He's not a nice guy, by the way. He's kind of not non-communicative, and as I said, sarcastic and occasionally nasty, and he can be tough on the director. But that might be purposeful. I mean, that entire room is filled with the best people at what they do, the best designers and hair and makeup people and wardrobe people, and they are just they go off into their own worlds and come back in just 4 days and create this stuff, 11 one-act plays from scratch, and as a result, there are ego issues. It's a guy who knows that he's the best lighting director in television, and now the best set designer in television is brought in this shiny wallpaper, and that brilliant lighting director says, I cannot light this shiny wallpaper properly. It's going to reflect. I'm not going to be able to get the skin tones proper on the face. But if that set designer can say, well, that's what Lorne wants, well, that shuts down the argument right there. And we are all in this to fulfill his vision. And so all of those individual ego issues get squashed by by that realization.
Awesome. So I know one thing that Mark Maron, I know, used to do on his show, whenever he would have, cast members or whoever on his show to interview, he would always ask them the same question. That question was, what is your Lorne Michaels story? Because he said apparently every cast member, whatever, always has like one specific story about Lorne Michaels that really stands out. So do you have your Lorne Michaels story?
I do. Yes. As I said, Lorne refuses to coast, and he's the only person in my life I have known who doesn't like to coast. Quite frankly, when a host comes back who's hosted before, I think, oh man, I don't have to show him where the men's room is. He knows how to read cue cards. I can coast a little bit here, especially if it's a former cast member who comes back. That's even better. They really know how the system works, and I can coast. Don't tell Lorne that, but I can coast. And a couple of years ago, 2017, Jimmy Fallon came back to host, and I thought, yep, I'm going to coast through this host. And sure enough, the Wednesday read-through went so smoothly. We were out at 8:00 because it was clear which sketches we would do. Thursday, we rehearsed. We rehearsed once, and I would say, I think I've got the camera blocking down. Ask Jimmy if he wants to do it again. And Jimmy said, no, I'm fine. We got out early on Thursday, and never get out early on Thursday just because Jimmy was so good at it. Friday, the first half of the day went beautifully in the exact same way. We were almost an hour ahead in the schedule. Now the cold opening and the monologue are usually the last things that are written, and we don't get that until late in the day Friday, and then we have to hustle to design a set and to decide how we're gonna block it. And I'm thinking to myself, I think the monologue might be a stand-up. Well, I love it when it's a stand-up because it's a comedian comes in and just does his own material for 5, 6, 7 minutes. And I don't even cut the audience laughter shots. I just stay with the host straight through, even if he wanders a little bit. Some just stay in one place, and it's great because I can work on the next sketch that's got so many changes in it, and I can try to think ahead to issues, to roadblocks we might face down the line. So I'm hoping they'll say, yeah, Jimmy's going to do stand-up. And I turned to the back row. It's filled with some writers and producers. Said, anybody know what the monologue is going to be? And he said, no, we don't know yet. Jimmy's up there with Lorne right now. I think, oh, that's a good sign. Jimmy's going to say, yeah, I've got material. I'd rather just do it myself. About 3:30, I turned around and said, do we know yet? And a producer said, oh yeah, I just got off the phone with Lorne's office. It's going to be a walk around. Now, a walk around is when the host leaves home base and sometimes goes out into the audience and out into the hallway and does something out in the hallway with cast members or some other people in the hallway. And I winced a little bit because they're a little harder to do. And of course, we've done it many times. So I just have to, we have to light the hallway a little differently. You have to make sure there's speakers out there so the audio can be heard. And so I said, okay. And I ordered a Steadicam. We don't use a Steadicam except in circumstances like this. So Steadicam picks them up, and Steadicam, is a camera mounted on a gyroscopic mount. So it floats instead of bouncing with the camera operator. And so we had to bring in a Steadicam operator and a Steadicam. But we've done that before, and then I took care of that. And so I turned around again and said, do we have a script yet? He said, oh no, but I will tell you this, it's going to be a musical walk around, which I winced again, because that means he's got to be able to hear the band, and it's a little more difficult for audio to mix the band that's up on stage with a guy walking around out in a hallway, which isn't designed to have studio ambiance, but we've done that before too. So that just we had to work that out. I said, okay, yeah, all right, we can do a musical. Anything else? He said, yeah, they're going to be dancers. Oh, I thought, man, I hate it when there are dancers out there, because when you cross off the studio floor, you go through this little tiny tunnel underneath the bleachers where the stagehands stand, most of them. And you go out into the hallway, and there's a page desk right there. And then they've got to either go down a hallway, or it's just tough to choreograph the dancers. I said, well, please, no more than 4 dancers. He said, no, here's Lorne's idea. All of the seats on the floor, I guess there are about 35 seats down, 36 seats down on the floor. when Jimmy comes through that group, he's going to say to them, okay, we're having a party. This is the first time the show's ever been done live across the country. And he's going to say, let's get up and dance. And all of those people in the audience are going to look like audience people, but they're really going to be dancers. And when Jimmy comes down and says that, they're all going to stand up, and all 35 of them are going to fill in behind him as he comes underneath the bleachers. I said, oh man, how are we going to do that? He said, well, he brought in a choreographer who's working on it right now. Yeah, good luck, choreographer. I said, and what are we going to do with all those stage hands that are underneath the bleachers? He said, well, those stage hands are going to look like stage hands, but they really be dancers. And as Jimmy comes through, followed by all these 35 audience people, all of these stage hands will fill in with him and come out right to the page desk. And then when he gets to the page desk, there'll be 2 pages there, but they'll actually be dancers. And they'll spin up off the chair, and they'll join with Jimmy, and they'll continue down the hallway, that entire menagerie. And then Harry Styles, who's a musical guest, has come out of the side door, and he will join Jimmy, and then they'll all come down, followed by all these dancers down to the next hallway. Now in that next hallway, Harry Styles will peel off, but then 2 cast members will come out of either side of that hallway and come down and crisscross in front of Jimmy as he continues all the way down to the end of the hall. I thought, well, first of all, we've never gone that far. We've always turned down into one of those side hallways to circle back into the studio. But so if we're going to go all the way down that hall, it's almost 100 yards all the way down that hallway. I ordered a second Steadicam. So then the lighting people had to go out and light the whole rest of that hallway. I said, okay, so he's going to finally get down to the end of the hallway. Then what? So he's going to lean out and touch the sort of like he's touching the second camera and spin it around as he spins into the elevator bank where there will be more dancers. And I said, oh God, I don't know if we can get that far. I don't know that we can light that far. I don't know that we can get the music down that far, but we'll give it a shot. I said, so at that point, he's going to say, hey, Harry Styles here. We got a great show. We'll be right back. He said, no. Then Lorne wants him to sprint back down the hallway as fast as he can, with the camera, of course, backing up with him as fast as he can, all the way back into the studio, where he's going to get one of the studio cameras and turn it around to reveal home base. It will be filled with dancers. I thought, did Lorne forget the show airs tomorrow night? How can that happen? So we rehearsed it, and the choreographer was great, and all those dancers, probably 100 dancers, filled through and didn't trip and managed to get us back. The camera operators down here spun around with him, and then he peeled off as Jimmy came back down. The first camera operator backed up with him and spun around to let him into the studio. In the studio, it had the crane. He turned the crane, and the crane went up in the air to see this big crowd on home base. We finally had it worked out. Well, it was about midnight. We went up to Lorne's office for the meeting where he shows us what the dress rehearsal rundown is going to be like. And the first thing Lorne says is, I hate the way that hallway looks. And I thought to myself, how do you even see the hallway? It's filled with dancers. I didn't say that, but I thought that. And he said, I want it to look like he's coming out of Studio 8H and walking into Studio 54. I wanted to have a disco feel to it. I look over the lighting director and the set designer, and they're both nodding. I think they're biting their tongues, but they're nodding. And they said, okay, we can do that. Well, I went home at midnight and worked on the show for a couple of hours and came back in the next morning. And sure enough, that entire hallway had been transformed into a disco. All the walls had been painted black with gold striping, sort of deco striping. And the pictures had been taken off the wall, and monitors were gone. There were disco balls in the ceiling. There were fog lights, and there were strip lights along the hallway with fog machines. somehow overnight, that whole thing had been transformed because that's what Lorne wanted. Well, we rehearsed it again later that day, and we sort of had it down. We got rid of the fog lights because the dancers were slipping on the fog residue, but everything else stayed. We managed to get it all. I think we added some more dancers. We did it live at 11:30 with all of those details exactly the way he had envisioned, and it was a very, very cool a monologue. Now, that show, if it had been up to me, that would have been 10 minutes of Jimmy Fallon standing on stage telling a joke. But because of Lorne, it was this unbelievable production number. And I received a Directors Guild Award and an Emmy for that show. And both of those awards belong to Lorne Michaels.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. I know I had to mention that, as a Mark Maron podcast fan, I had to keep that tradition going into my podcast.
Yes.
So another question, you mentioned your Emmys, right? So I feel like whenever, professionals, in any professional field, you have your awards or whatever, and, the top of their game always, if they won multiple, if they're lucky enough to do that, they sometimes will have like, oh, this was my favorite NBA championship, or this was my favorite Oscar, They felt like they really had to work really hard, or they felt like they really accomplished something with whatever they did to win that honor. So what are your favorite Emmys, or maybe your single most favorite Emmy, the one that you look at and are like, yeah, you know what, that's the one?
That's a great question, and that has never been asked to me. But I have a two-part answer. The direct answer is, I think the Emmy for the 40th anniversary show was the standout, partly because it was a different category. There's a category for variety series and a category for variety specials. And that was variety special, and that was up against the Oscars and the Tonys and some the Kennedy Center honors and some bigger shows. And so I'm proud to head-to-head managed to win in that year. By the same token, I am a little sheepish about the whole Emmy world. And that's partly because I won one in 1976 for directing the Mike Douglas show. And I was way over my head for that show. And I was lucky to have a job at all, let alone to, in competition, win an Emmy for it. But I was also too young to realize that how the system works. As a result, the very next day, I became a jerk. I thought, oh my God, I'm 26 years old and I just won an Emmy. It's this big gold statue that says I'm the best at something that I do for a living. And I thought, I think God created television just so I could show off. And the producers would come up to me and say, could we do the fashion show a little different this time? Because I'd like to bring the models down the aisle but in the audience for a change. And I would say, wait a minute, do you have an Emmy? Because I have an Emmy and I think maybe we'll do it my way. And I'm not going to bring the models to the audience. And I was a jerk. And people treat you differently and you think of yourself differently. And I was full of myself. Well, the next year I was asked to be on the Blue Ribbon panel that selects one of the categories, one of the winners. And it's different now, but at the time, what you would do is go in and spend a whole Saturday and a whole Sunday just sitting in a room, a hotel room or a studio room, office somewhere, and just watch show after show. After about the fourth show, you say, oh my God, please just put on something that'll keep me awake. And I stopped judging the directorial skills set that I was seeing on a show and just wanting to be entertained, wanting to see a show that was fun to watch. And when it was over, I'm not sure I voted fairly. I voted for what I liked, the show I liked, not necessarily the directing that was better than some other directing. And I stopped and I said, well, wait a minute. I wonder if that's what happened the year I won. I said, wait, what was that show that I thought, I know, that was the show where Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire came on the same show. Mike had talked them into it, and they sat and talked about old time Hollywood for the first time in their lives. That they actually sat there and shared notes and talked about what that world was. It was a fascinating show to hear those two old guys talk about old Hollywood, but it could have been directed by a relatively bright parrot. I mean, I just follow the action, just not even action, follow the speaker. Make sure you've got Fred on when Fred's talking and Gene is on when he's talking. I mean, there was music in that show. There was more to it than that. But basically, I think what happened is people were sitting in that hotel room saying, please put on something that'll keep me awake. So I said, whoa, there's Gene Kelly. And there's Fred Astaire. This is great television. None of them were saying, boy, this is really well directed. They were saying, this is great television. And so I'm sure that's what happened. They voted for, vote for that director. That was the best show we saw today. And I realized that it's not a very scientific system. And even though today it's done differently and a little more scientifically, it's still not a real solid measure of directing skill, isolated from the rest of what happened. And so I now, and certainly through the more statues I've gotten for Saturday Night Live, realize that people are voting for the best, largest, flashiest, most show-off show with the finest cast and music performances. And it's just, if somebody directs Jimmy Fallon, a lot of that work is Jimmy talking to a guest, and that kind of directing doesn't get as much attention as directing the kind of stuff that I get to do. And so my show itself is so much flashier, and I'm not going to give those statues back. I'm proud of them, but I also know that it's not any measure of my skills compared to others.
So obviously to work at SNL or in live television in general, you have to be very flexible, like as you were saying with the Jimmy Fallon story before. So what is it like behind the scenes when big news happens right before a show, and more specifically when Trump got COVID right before the season premiere? How was that?
We have some serious tap dancing to do, and actually through much of the Trump period, Weekend Update and especially Cold Opens were written late and staged late, and there was real shuffle and hustle to get sets built and to get proper costumes for people who were doing impressions of senators or vice presidents or foreign presidents at the last minute. And there were some panic moments. The Dave Chappelle show aired the Saturday after the elections, and it wasn't until that afternoon that Biden was declared the winner. And so that was a big shuffle and tap dance, and we're pretty good at that. It just adds to the production panic, but I'm kind of proud of how quickly we respond on every level. Certainly the writers, who are just amazing, and we complain all the time of, we don't have a script yet. How are we gonna block this? We still have the music rehearsal to do. We still have Weekend Update. We don't have even a script. Well, those poor but brilliant writers are sitting there trying to think up not only ways to tell the story in one set with the cast at hand and with whatever special effects can be garnered in an hour, but they got to make it funny too. And I don't have any right to complain about what we go through, but it's, to answer your question, that period of time had a little denser atmosphere than ever before. On the other hand, the past 5 shows, 5, 6, 7, 8, past 8 shows since the election haven't been much easier. We've sort of picked up that habit of, well, we did it last week, we can do it last minute this week too. But that's part of what we do, and I think what we should be doing, and I'm happy we do. On Sundays, I'm happy we do.
Speaking of Trump a little bit, he kind of had this attack towards SNL at some point once you guys were like really making fun of him. Obviously, it wasn't just SNL that he was attacking. He was attacking anyone that was critical of him. But what was kind of the feeling inside SNL behind the scenes when all that was going on? And how are you guys feeling about that, getting attacked by the president of the United States at the time?
I can't speak for the entire operation, but I think I would summarize it as great. Now we've crossed the line a couple of times, and we have admitted it a couple of times. And I think the best story is about the congressman named Crenshaw, Ben Crenshaw. He was a Afghanistan veteran who had lost an eye.
Dan Crenshaw, yeah, the one with the eye patch.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And one week, Pete Davidson on Weekend Update sort of made passing fun of him. He was talking about a whole series of Republican candidates, and he mentioned this guy was in the war in Afghanistan, and I guess he was a hero or something, or I don't know. And he sort of belittled him, and it was an ad lib, and it was not well received, quite rightly. And there was quite a firestorm on the internet. And I got some personal stuff from people I went to high school with, said, "How dare you?" And I was upset by it and hurt by it, and felt victimized by it a little bit myself. But I wrote an email to them saying, "Hey, look, I have great respect for our military, and in fact, I was raised in a military family and was raised to go to West Point, and I do think that Pete went too far, but you have to recall that he's a 23-year-old kid, and he ad-libbed a little bit, and he got blinded by the spotlight for a moment and said something he knows he shouldn't have. And but don't forget, he's suffered too. You know, his dad died in 9/11. He was a firefighter who died in 9/11, and not that gives him the right to criticize anyone, let alone anybody in uniform, but it was unfortunate. Well, the next week, Lorne managed to convince, or made a call. I don't know if it was convincing. He made a call to Crenshaw and said, "You want to come on the show?" And Crenshaw was on the Weekend Update the next week, sitting beside Pete Davidson, making fun of Pete and doing it brilliantly. And he was great and funny and moving too. And Pete took it like the good kid he is, and I think we handled that well. I think some of my favorite moments as SNL over these years have been the serious ones. The day after the Hillary Trump election, we started the show with Kate playing the piano and singing Hallelujah as Hillary Clinton, and it was beautifully done. And she just turned and said, "Hey, we're going to be all right." And it wasn't funny, but it was healing, and it was sweet and moving. The day after the kids in Connecticut, that massacre of Sandy Hook, we started the show with a whole group of kids singing Silent Night. And then we faded to black and faded up, and they all said, "Live from New York." After the massacre in Las Vegas, we had the band, I can't remember the name, band that was on stage that night come on the show and sing "We Won't Back Down" to open the show. And that was moving to me too. Of course, the famous one is the first show after 9/11, where Lorne on stage, surrounded by first responders and police officers and firefighters, and at the time, a sane Rudy Giuliani as mayor, saying, "Okay, we're back," and let's. And Lorne turned to Rudy and said, "Okay, is it okay if we're funny?" And Rudy said, "Why start now?" or something like that. And it was a healing moment. And to me, those have been additional signs that Lorne has a fingertip on the pulse of what this country is and what it needs. And even though he's a Canadian, I have great respect for that sensitivity.
The Kate McKinnon singing Hallelujah is one of my favorite SNL moments. I think that was like around the time I started watching when I was a sophomore in high school.
Oh, great. And then coincidentally, maybe not coincidentally, but that was the same week that that Hallelujah's composer died, and Leonard Cohen died that week, and that made it even more timely and moving.
And that's the same with the Las Vegas massacre. Then they say "Won't Back Down." That's Tom Petty too. He died that day, I think, right?
That's exactly right. Okay.
So to wrap up our SNL discussion, do you have a favorite skit?
Well, I think the Jimmy Fallon monologue, I'd have to say outranks almost everything else, simply because of what we went through to get it, and how definitive it is of his insistence that we be the best we can.
What was your time at Penn State like?
Well, I mentioned just a couple of them, getting into a main stage production and then continuing to do some serious some interesting acting throughout my time there. I loved working at the Pavilion, which is the tiny little theater in the Round. It used to be a cattle barn, and it's just a delightful, intimate place to make theater. I worked with Helen Manful and Lowell Manful, husband and wife, faculty members at the time, both brilliant people. I got a chance to do some writing and discover that I wasn't a bad writer. I was accused of plagiarism by 4 different professors, all wrongly. And I thought, well, I fooled them. I guess I have something to offer there. And I played for Joe Paterno. I loved my time at Penn State and thought that I was surrounded by a faculty that cared more about teaching than tenure. That theater department was so open. It didn't matter what major you were. It didn't matter you were in competition with serious theater majors. That maybe changed now. I don't know. But my sense of being accepted in that community just enhanced my love of being there and love of performing and love of storytelling. And that's all because of Penn State.
Have you been back to campus like recently, or?
A couple of times, and love doing that. I've been back to talk to some students, back to talk to some theater students and some directing students. I gave a speech one time at the colloquium, or there's a university-wide event where it's a big I know, it's at the hotel. What's the hotel?
Oh, the Penn Stater?
No, what's the other one?
Nittany Lion Inn.
Nittany Lion Inn. So this was, I don't know, it's 10 years ago or something. And they bring in 4 or 5 speakers a year, and it's open to the entire university and the entire community. and a couple, 300 or 400 people, and it's a big luncheon with a main speaker. And I'm not sure why they asked me, but I was thrilled, and it said absolutely. And they booked me a year ahead of time. But about 6 months before I was to appear, the story broke of I haven't told the story in a long time, so there's some details I forget. The Paterno issue with the assistant coach, and we made a joke about it on Weekend Update, and it was crude, and it was probably went too far. And I thought, oh my God, they definitely don't want me to speak now. So I called them up the next day. I said, I know that probably was an embarrassment, and it was unfair, and whether I had anything to do with it or not, I'm willing to back out. They said, well, your speech isn't for 6 months, so I think it'll blow over by then. Don't worry about it. Well, I said, okay, I'll be there. Well, 1 week before I was to appear, it was announced that there was going to be a biopic about Joe Paterno. This is after he died. And Seth Meyers said, there's going to be a movie about the life and times of Joe Paterno. And we believe that, and it's going to star Al Pacino. And we think that means for the second time in an Al Pacino movie, the most famous line will be, "Say hello to my little friend." Thank you. That's the line. That's what I
was thinking that might have been it. And I was like, I don't know about that.
I don't know about it. That was what I said too. I thought, oh, that's what everybody's going to say. Oh man, you can't do that. Say hello to my little friend. That's exactly what it was. So I started the speech by saying, hey, it's been a great year for us at Saturday Night Live. And how's this year gone for you guys? And there was a laugh, and it was a big enough laugh that I thought, okay, I'm off the hook. And that was the most important time I've been back at Penn State. And a couple of awards things, some alumni stuff, and that's been fun. And I stay in touch with the broadcasting department, and thrilled that the place is still thriving, and obviously turning out some good graduates too, like you three.
Thank you for joining us. This was awesome to talk to you and to nerd out about SNL a bit and to really dig into your past with Penn State. So thank you so much once again for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it too, except for the Al Pacino story. Good luck to all of you. And if you ever have questions about specifics in your lives or my advice about what internships to take or how to get a first job, call me again.
Alrighty, guys. And that was it. Our fantastic conversation with the director of SNL, Don King, proud Penn State alumnus. As he said, local from Pittsburgh, PA, who directed more hours of live network television than anyone else in the history of television, with a decorated television career, even prior to his current job, heading up the directing of SNL. Another awesome guest, guys. What can you say?
It was awesome. We had a list of questions, and we asked him one, and he answered 6 of them. He was an awesome storyteller. Got a lot more out of that than I was expecting to. So, thank you again to Don for coming on. Thanks to Grace for joining us again as a guest host and for setting up the whole conversation. Potentially our biggest guests that we've had on the show. So that's all from this episode of Onward State. My name is Sam Brungo.
Matt Paolizzi.
Grace Cunningham.
We'll see you next time.